Hi, Lawrence. Thank you for joining us on the What
Hello.
Podcast.
It is such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself, let the people listening know who you are, and then we'll have a good conversation.
Absolutely. So my name is Laurence Anthony. Where should I start? I'm I'm a coach. I'm a former performer, a small business owner, uh, a traveler, an adventurer, a movie lover, and we could go on and on. But I am someone who likes to help people get to where they're going.
Love it. Super simple. Where they're
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
Thought you were going to come out with some complex title or, some context. So when you're doing that work, who are the kinds of people that you're working with?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. The type of people that I work with are it varies. I work with high performers, athletes, executives, tier one performers, operators, folks who are operating at the highest level of their industry. And I also work with folks who are looking to get there, or folks who are looking to teams and individuals who are looking to find their place, or teams and individuals who are looking to go from where they are to where they want to be. And that may not be at the highest level. They may be just starting out. They may be thinking about where they want to get to or contemplating about what their next move is. I I often say that as much as I help those who are high performing and are looking to get better or maintain, I also help those who maybe have no idea where they want to go next and help find that direction with them.
Mm. What, so you said you mentioned athletes, I think, in your
Yeah.
in your clientele. So what is the focus with athletes? Is it mindset coaching or more performance driven?
It's both. There are athletes who are active who I coach and athletes who have retired from whatever sport they were dominant in or a part of. And for the latter, I end up coaching those athletes who are looking to figure out what their next phase is, what their next step is. Oftentimes, these are individuals who have dominated their field, who have been exceptional in
Mm,
the area that they're in, and they're looking for what's next and looking to step into another field. And that poses a number of challenges because it's something new for them if they're not going to be part of the sport. Right. I've worked with
yeah.
folks who have left the sport entirely and maybe have gone into something like real estate or finance, and they have to learn a new muscle. So when I'm coaching those retired athletes, it's a very different thing. Sometimes it's confidence, it's insecurity, it is disbelief, limiting beliefs. And for the athletes who are still within their sport, it is how to dominate, how to be better, how to maybe be a better leader, be a better performer. Um, so yeah, somewhat mindset coaching and performing.
Hmm. Well, and I think what you're highlighting is the transitions that people go through. That coaching is such an important partnering, co-creating relationship in those important transitions in life, especially leaving an athlete leaving a sport that they've been dominant in. So what do you believe about coaching?
That's such a great question. Um, if you had asked me a year ago, right, when I'd left a coaching and consulting firm, and well, it started 2025, so almost 2 years ago. So I left the coaching consulting firm around 2023, and I knew that I wanted to start my own shop, and that happened in 23. And it wasn't until early 24 where things really took shape. If you'd asked me that question of what I believe about coaching, then it'd be very different than what I believe now.
Mm,
Uh, I think if you'd asked me then, it would have been my answer would have been much more proactive and much more I'm taking the wheel. And I know that that is not the case. I've seen, it's only been just over a year and a bit, and my mindset, I continue to improve. I still a novice. I consider myself. I think we're always learning. And so for me, I realize now that it is less doing and it's more listening. and it's more asking. Um, and it's letting my clients take the driver's seat, and I'm there to help steer when necessary. The analogy I sometimes use, I use a lot of analogies, but one that I sometimes use is, if I'm a driving instructor, they've got the wheel and I am in the passenger seat. Are there brakes that I have? Absolutely. Do I have my own passenger wheel? Absolutely. But I'm not driving the car. Right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
there. I'm there to help point in the direction that they need if they ask. But I'm there to ask questions. I'm there to to plant some seeds. But they're the ones driving.
And so how does that differ from the consulting, I guess, the work that you were doing for someone else?
When I first started consulting, I was at a coaching and consulting firm for about almost 9 years,
Oh, wow.
and I knew immediately that, I'm just gonna be very candid, I didn't want to do the work that was the work. I knew that I wanted to do more than what was on paper. And I knew that if I just did the by the book job, I was not going to be happy at all. And so I did what I often do, which is do it my way. And I was able to take what the baseline job was. And, in consulting, for the most part, you're looking at data, you're looking at numbers, or you're analyzing the status of a particular company or individuals and making recommendations about how to improve for the most part. And I don't do well when I'm bored. I like to be challenged, and I'm very much in the people business, right? I'm not someone who could sit in a cubicle and just look at data. I need to be interacting with people. And so for me, that work started as just look at data and how to get them to meet their sales goals or their target goals. And I said, well, I'm not excited about that. And if I'm not excited about that, then my clients aren't going to be excited. And I have no desire to step into anything in which I am not excited or pumped up to do the work. And so what I did is I found myself very early on kind of motivating my clients or speaking directly to them. And maybe it wasn't directly tied to the job, right? But I knew that if I was able to connect, and I knew that if I was able to really listen to the people in front of me, that they were more likely to do their job better.
Hmm. Interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking about all the people who ask me about, paths that coaches take to establishing themselves. And so I'm curious about your journey from that working for someone else, to working for yourself. What can you tell us a little bit about how you built your practice, and what were the key kind of milestones in that?
Natalie, I knew for a long time that I wanted to do my own thing. And I've known that since I was 17. I started my first business when I was 17. It was very similarly, it was a production company and marketing company. And again, it
Hmm.
was me listening to folks and trying to help them in some capacity. And I knew that I took that and then sold that, went into some other stuff. And when I was at this consulting firm, I knew that I wanted to do my own thing. I just didn't know what that looked like. I knew it wasn't going to be forever. So I was constantly thinking, what's next? What's next? And I'm very much a believer and I like to leave things on my own terms. And so I said, okay, this is not going to be a forever thing. And before they're like, hey, we're done with you, I should think about what I want to do. And there were periods of times throughout when I was at that firm, and I was very lucky. I had an amazing team, amazing colleagues, a phenomenal executive team that always believed in me, that really, um, really invested in me, and it was good because I felt empowered, but I knew that I wanted to do more, and I didn't know what that looked like. And I'll be honest, there was fear. How
Hmm.
would I start my own thing? What would that look like? And I'm a massive film and TV guy, uh, being a former actor for sure, being a published writer as well. But just I love storytelling. It's a big part of my life, and a big part of how I coach, and a big part of how I live. And I thought, okay, I love Mad Men. Mad Men is one of my favorite shows. And I said, okay, I want to start my own practice. I want to start my own firm. Okay, but where? How? What does this look like? And
Mm,
what would it take? And the the desire was there, the know-how was not. And then as years went on, and I became better at being in front of people, which is interesting because even as a performer, I find in my experience that you have confident actors and you have insecure actors. I when I started acting in high school, right, it was a great way for me to hide my insecurity because I got to be another character. And so I
mm,
didn't have to be Lawrence. I could be someone else. And that was a great way for me to be comfortable. And I go to auditions and the same thing. I could be someone else, but yeah, I didn't always love being on set. And I didn't always love being in front of a camera, even though that's what I'm paid to do. And being in front of so many people at this consulting firm, there were times where I have to be in a room full of anywhere from 2 to 100 people and talking to them and commanding that room. And as time went on, I was like, oh, I love this. This is my room. And I very much am in control of this room and I like it. And I want to do more of this. And I got better at being on my feet and thinking on my feet and thinking about how to pivot and then posed with a problem, how to solve it or work with someone to solve it or diffuse conflict, right? And sometimes you're in a room and people don't necessarily agree with what you're saying. And so how to de-escalate. And those are
mm.
always fun for me. I have zero desire to be in a room where everyone's just agreeing. It's boring. And so as I got better at that, I said, wait a second. Okay, I can do this on my own now. And now what does that look like? And start to ask myself that. And what I tell everyone who asks me when what they want to do next and where to start. And I remember someone saying to me when I worked in real estate years ago, like 12, 15 years ago, someone said, when you're about to make a big decision, ask yourself a few key questions. Do I want to do this? All right, start with that. Um, can I do this? Do I know how? And then ultimately end up with I will, right? So it has to start with desire. Then you have to be able to ask yourself whether you can, um, whether you have all the tools available to you, whether you know how, right? And once you do, right, once you put all those together, once you know, once you decide that you want to, once you decided that you can, next step is to do. And that's where it all started.
I was listening to a Mel Robbins podcast in the car the other day, and she was talking about questions, kind of like what you just asked, the questions that you just asked yourself. And she said, when in a time of decision making, a good question to ask is, um, when I'm 80 years old, looking back, will I regret this decision? Or will I regret not doing it? Right? Will I regret doing it or not doing it? And and that's a good way of measuring how important it is to you, right?
You're absolutely right. I'm laughing because I love Mel, and I'm laughing because I genuinely believe that's a great way to make decisions, and I've used that personally and professionally. I remember I actually used that to get a date years and years and years ago,
Uh,
and
okay, do tell. We want to hear that story.
it was I met this girl. I was out at this like big karaoke thing. I met this girl and she was stunning. And I remember I asked her out and she was only in town for a little bit. And I said, well, I would love to take you out to dinner. And she said, I'm only here for a couple days. We had a wonderful connection that evening. And it's totally like some before sunrise Ethan Hawke thing. And she said, I'm only here for a couple days, right? What good could possibly come out of dinner? If I develop feelings for you, it's just gonna suck and I'm gonna feel sad. And this is before any Mel Robbins and before I even saw Before Sunrise. I said to her, in 10 years, are you gonna regret going on a date? And she said,
Uh,
I haven't thought about it like that. She goes, no. So we had wonderful sushi dinner. It was great.
is your other name Rico Suave by any chance? That's so
There,
funny.
there, there, there are a few days, but yeah, not that one.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's a great question to ask yourself. Am I going to regret this, right? Or am I going to regret not doing it?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's the question that I think is the most powerful. It steps us into like a bigger picture of thinking, because often when we're in fear, we're in this micro view of
Mhm.
things. We're stuck in it. That great U2 song "Stuck in a Moment" is always what I think about when I think, how can I like expand, go bigger, to see the bigger picture of what's actually happening. And I really feel like that gets me unstuck into like a bigger, more expansive way of thinking. Um, so, because we hear that a lot, the things that I hear coaches and other people starting businesses talk about: imposter syndrome, this lack of confidence that we have in our abilities and our professionalism and our skill, the fear of putting yourself out there, rejection, right? When you own your own business, rejection comes with it, right? You have to be willing to put yourself out there. And I just actually ended a class where there was a couple of students talking about how they challenged themselves to fail, to like just increase their comfort level with failure. So what were some of the things, strategies, I don't know, steps that you took to get over some of those hurdles as an entrepreneur?
Such a great question. It's funny you took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna ask you the same thing because I mean you've gone through starting, your own coaching academy, a very successful academy, and so I'm not gonna let you off the hook. I'm gonna want to hear yours. Um, for me, I'm fast. You brought up one of my favorite F words, and it's failure, right?
Mhm,
And two of my favorite words are F words, and one of them is not what you think it is. One is
mhm.
definitely one is definitely failure, and the other is yeah, the
Come on,
other is
I don't know.
fear.
I'm really waiting. We're all waiting with bated breath. What is it? What's the next
The
F
other
word?
one is a four-letter F word, but it's not that one. The other
Okay.
four-letter F word that I love is fear,
Mhm.
and I am fascinated by both fear and failure. And these are two things that come up for my clients. They're two things that, come up, I think, for all of us, and they certainly come up for me. And I love what Tim Ferriss says. And Tim Ferriss, I think, is
Mhm.
when people coined this is you can't be fearless. The goal is to fear less. And I talk about this all the
Oh, I like
time.
that. Mhm.
Yeah. And so, if Tim's listening to this, I've definitely stolen that. But I told myself that before I launched. I said, okay, are there scary things? Yes, absolutely. All right, let's confront them. And one of the early things that I did, I think I put out this reel on IG, was about fear and just understanding this word fear, right? Which comes from the Greeks, right? And it was such a big word that they had multiple definitions for the word fear, right? And it was to turn away. It was also double, like almost two-faced. So fear has multiple meanings. And for me, it was understanding that, okay, I'm going to be afraid to do this, but rather than let that fear paralyze me, use it to propel me and use it to ask myself, what don't I know? What am I missing?
Mm,
What what could possibly prevent me from moving forward? Because I think if we use fear as an adversary, it can paralyze us. If we see it as an adversary, it paralyzes us. But if we see fear as an ally, it actually helps us tremendously. Right? There should be a healthy part of a healthy bit of fear. If I'm a pilot, right, my thought should be I am afraid to some extent, but that fear should allow me to recognize the responsibility I have, that I'm responsible for all these souls on this plane, that I'm going to now check my engines, check everything I need to do in order to fly well, right? If I'm afraid of giving a presentation the next day, then that fear can either paralyze me if it's an adversary, but if it's an ally, I can now look at it and say, okay, what am I missing? Let me acknowledge that fear. Let me clock it. Okay, am I confident with knowing my material? Do I know how long the presentation is going to be? Do I know these parts? And I think a lot of people use fear as this monster in the basement that they got to run away from. Whereas instead, it could be a signal. Hey, just check your engines. Check your blind spots. And I find the minute I check my blind spots, and if you feel comfortable, and if you've done all your due diligence, then that fear dissipates, and then confidence steps in.
Yeah, we call it breaking down the emotional intensity of fear in coaching when we ask those good
Mm,
questions, what's at risk and, what's the worst thing that could happen. And when a client starts to visualize the worst, they realize, I can handle that. That's not so bad
mm.
until it's
I
like,
love that.
yeah. So the breaking down of that emotion, the emotional hold that fear has on us is such an important, powerful thing. And also, I love what you're saying about reframing the relationship you have with fear, that it is part of, I think it's a healthy part of our psyche. It's also what's kept us alive and, in
Yeah.
evolution, right? Fear. The fight, flight, or freeze response is there to protect us as humans. It's not there to to stifle necessarily if we won't, if we, like you said, if the relationship is healthy with fear. And failure too. I was talking to a class the other day, and I find it so interesting. I think it was our class we talked about it too, where we talked about the where does this bad relationship with failure start?
Mm,
It's in classrooms where you're failing a test and you feel bad, your sense of self-worth goes down, you're socially regarded differently. Like there's a lot of stigma attached to failure in schools. And I feel like if we could change that relationship to see failure as an opportunity, which is what it really is, an opportunity to learn, to pivot, to assess, and to re-engage, that, because I mean there's nothing that we do in society or otherwise where we develop and grow that doesn't start with failing to teach us what, even little babies crawling, they gotta get it, they have to fall down a few times to get up and try it again. And knowing how to readjust, right, to realign yourself is such a great, powerful, thing that a human has. And I feel like we need to really celebrate failure as opposed to, thinking of it as a bad thing.
I couldn't agree more. And I absolutely loved our class on failure,
Mm,
and just the way you framed it was phenomenal. And it real, I mean, I could talk about failure for hours, right? Again, it's one of my favorite F words is there's so much packed into that. And our fear of failure, those two often go hand in hand, right? Fear and failure. And
yeah.
almost anyone worth their weight in salt will say, fail fast, right? Because if you're not trying, right? Figure out what's not going to work, right? And when you do fail fast, you're like, okay, you know what? At least I made the effort. That didn't work. What do I do? Right. And Mandela's quote is one of my favorites: we win or we learn. And I
Mm,
think that it's such a great perspective instead of, well, win or we lose. Well, there's a lesson in every loss. So we win or we learn. And failure is just that. It is learning after an attempt. Right. And I love it. The Jordan quote that you had in class resonates. It's one of my favorites. Is, I failed countless times. I've missed X amount of shots. And one of the things that a lot of my clients have in common, one of the favorite things about these tier one operators is that they're willing to try and they're willing to fail. And they recognize that it's part of success. And that's why I brought that quote in last week. The class was make defeat your fuel, right? And I love that ad. And it just is, you're going to lose. You're going to drop the ball. You're going to make a mistake. How do you respond?
yeah. Yeah, I remember, who was it? Somebody saying, I don't get mad, I get deceitful. Or is it deceitful? I can't remember, but it's this like, get angry, let it fuel you, in other words, is what you said. Um, so yeah, so what were we talking about? So your path to entrepreneurship then. Where
Yeah,
and
it was that.
yeah. So what have been some of the biggest challenges you faced?
Oh, you know, it's a great question. I'm reflecting on it in terms of what some of my biggest challenges were. And I gotta tell you, Natalie, I think the biggest challenge for most people, and I stand by this, I believe the and I actually get emotional thinking about it. I think the biggest challenge is just starting in
Mm,
anything.
mhm.
Just start. And by the way, starting may look different for other people. If you want to run a marathon, if you want to start running, you don't sometimes just start by running. You start by buying some shoes and then you lace up those shoes, right? And oftentimes it is just starting, and that's different for so many. When I was launching my business, I used this metaphor because I fear was so big and I used it to propel me. And I thought about flying, and I thought that there's a perfect analogy there with flying. Because in order to get somewhere different from where you are, for the most part, geographically, you got to get on a flight, right? Unless you live in a country that's pretty small, right? But let's use Canada for example. You want to get to BC from Ontario or PEI, you're gonna have to get on a flight, right? You want to get to the West Coast, if you live in New York, you gotta get on a flight. You could drive, but it's gonna take longer. I thought about this just in life, and I thought about this with business and with any goal, any dream, is you're going to have to get on a flight. Now, do you know the percentage of people that are afraid of flying?
No, okay.
It sits at around 46%, which is really interesting, right? Around 46% of the population experience some type of fear of flying. Do you
Mm,
know the odds of a plane crash?
yeah, very low.
Very
Very
low. As of 2023, the odds of a plane crash were approximately 1 in 3 billion.
wow.
Right? Which is really, really low. Now, of course, we know that these things happen, unfortunately, but the odds are really low. So if the odds of a plane crash are 1 in 3 billion, and yet almost half of the population has some fear of flying, what that tells me and what that told me was most people never leave their house to get to the airport. Most people never arrive at the airport. Most people never go through security. Most people never board the plane, and most people get off the plane before it even takes off. And so for me, I thought if I can just sit on the plane while it's taking off and endure, I'll be fine. And I think that's the hardest part, is just being able to take off. That doesn't mean that during turbulence as you're climbing. It's funny, for someone who flies so often, I I'm admitting this public, I think for the first time, I have a bit of a fear of flying, even though I fly a
I was gonna
lot.
say, you know all these statistics. It must be because you dug into this
I
yourself.
did. I totally did. It's something I've had to tell myself to like feel comfortable.
Okay, okay.
And that still doesn't help, by the way. I find martinis help, but
Yeah.
I totally do. But that's what I use as a metaphor for starting a business or starting any endeavor or doing something that is different. If you can just get wheels up, get to wheels up. Now, on that climb, it might be bumpy. There are going to be turbulence. And when you get to that 30,000 foot threshold, it might be a little better, but it still might be choppy at times, right? But for me, the hardest thing is just get wheels up and take off. And that was my biggest challenge, was just taking off. Once you're, climbing or in cruise control, there are other things that you got to worry about, but at least you're doing it. At least you're doing it.
Yeah, and I wonder how much the locus of control matters in that. Like, because we know statistically driving a car is a lot more risky than a plane. And yet people, I think, if they think they're behind the wheel and they have control, they somehow have a lower risk attached to that. Because when I fly, I'm not a super fearful flyer. I do think about, like, things that could happen, but I don't, like, it doesn't let me, like, I don't think I'm nervous, but I get it. I am somebody who really likes to have control, though. So
Mhm.
and it's that part that, like, you just give up, and sometimes you just need to let go, right? And when you have a goal and you don't know, you can't control. That's the thing about being an entrepreneur. There's a lot of things that you can't control. You got to focus on what you can control and the goal. And sometimes you just got to let go of the wheel to get there, right? Because you can't really control all the different variables. And that's where people, I wonder if Nike knew, market research wise, if just do it really meant, like, just get started, right? Like, just do
Yeah.
it. if they knew psychologically the power that that would have eventually. And it's so true, right? Just do it, just start is it's a big hurdle for a lot of people.
It is, no, it's a massive one. And I love that you brought in, the Nike example, because I don't believe just do it means just win. That's not what it says.
No.
Just do it does not mean just succeed. Just do it. Just, you can talk it, but just do it. And I love that you brought this up. It gets into this whole thing about perfection. And what I've been saying most recently, and I've started to say to a couple of my clients and friends over the last 2 weeks, I don't know where this came from, but a lot of us are constantly looking for perfection, and it's what prevents us from doing something. It's what prevents us from starting, because we want to be perfect. uh Folks want to go to the gym, and they're like, well, I got to get in shape before I work out, right? And so people are constantly
Yes.
looking. Right? People are
So
constantly looking.
paradoxical, right?
Right, exactly, right, it is. Or I want to have the perfect page before I start writing. And so we're constantly looking for perfection. And what I've been saying over the last couple of weeks is, to me, the perfection is in the doing,
Mm.
right? The perfection is in just starting, or the perfection is in the effort. Because to your point, you can't control a lot. There are a lot of things outside of your sphere of control. Okay, so what can you control? You can control effort, you can control showing up, and if you are doing that, that for me is where perfection exists, in the effort, right? If I show up, if I make a goal to work out 6 days of the week, right? And I work out 6 days of the week, right? It's perfection. Now, I can't control the gains, the results, right? But if my goal was, I just want to show up to the gym, then that's a win. And that I've perfectly executed just showing up. Consistency alone is perfection.
Yeah, and it has a multiplier effect, right? Like you will end up getting in shape if you're going 6 days a week and doing the workout and doing the thing. And I think what people like what I know about building a business is consistency, like you said, like doing the work every single day and wanting to. Like that's the other thing. Like it was never a real chore. It was something that I would get lost in. Like I could, my sweet spot sitting on the couch and I could sit there for hours creating programs, diving into research, just getting lost in that. And that was what really um, was the work that was needed to build. I mean, that wasn't it, but it was a lot of it, right? It was creating programs that people wanted to participate in. And so doing it's the little consistency every day, it builds. And next thing you know, like that's what I love about this, this like looking back 3 years, 2 years, 10 years, when we do that, how much progress we notice. And people, and I'm a coach and I don't even do it enough. If I look back just on the last 6 months, how much my team and I have accomplished, holy moly. Like it blows my mind sometimes. And so that art of reflection is key as a coach. And I think it's maybe even overlooked by coaches themselves. But this we do make progress with small incremental steps and small tiny wins. And I don't think you're right. And I didn't say go out, just win. I said just do it. And that leads to progress, whatever progress might be. It might lead you to a dead end, but that dead end is going to teach you a lot,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's going to tell you how to pivot and what you need to do to get over that hurdle. And that is the beauty of the fear, failure, and everything that we just talked about. Yeah.
You mentioned reflection, and for you, when you were launching your academy, and doing all the big things you've done, how did fear and failure, or these things show up for you? And yes, I'm very aware that I just turned the tables to interview you,
I know,
so
I know, I know.
I'm
Yeah, I
very
know.
aware.
I got that. People like to do that to me, by the way. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm giggling because you just said when you launched the academy, I'm like, I don't think I launched an academy. I launched a course. Like that's what I did. we think, oh, that person has what they have today and then must have
Mm,
had that. But I launched a course and literally one class, like one course of 20 weeks or whatever it was. And it built and it became two, three, four, five, six. Now what? I don't know what we have anymore, but we have a huge selection of core programs and continuous learning because I love to create courses and the momentum, it was like a snowball effect. But it was because I learned the very first programs we filled, I filled them cold calling and emailing, cold call, email, trying to get 6 people in a room. Like that was literally, I spent hours and hours of my time doing that because I didn't have Google Ads. We didn't have the internet like we do today. It wasn't the same social media. Facebook was really about socializing and relationships. It wasn't about marketing and media and the interest economy that social media has now become. But today's world has provided such an opportunity for people to be seen, to branch out their networks. But at the time, I didn't have that, so it was really word of mouth and grind, grind, grind. So, and it became a community. It became an academy after 10 years, and even more now. We officially in 2016 launched, but before that, it was all the groundwork, 3 years of piloting and creating programs and learning. Oh my God, my learning curve was huge. And just overcoming all of the things that you feel like might get in your way. For me, my strategy for like imposter syndrome or lack of confidence was to skill up, educate
mm,
myself as much as I could, and get in front of people who had done it before. Mentors were key in my journey, because you can't know it all, especially when you're starting. You don't have the experience. You need people to share their experience with you, which is the key, I think, differentiator between a mentor and a coach, right? And I really had mentors, people I could like drill and ask questions and could support the design of our programs and that were much smarter than me. And I think that was key. And then the people, the information that I didn't have at my fingertips, the people that I couldn't access, that's when podcasts started to become really popular. And guys like Tim Ferriss and all of those great, beautiful, brilliant minds that we could sit in the living room and listen to as though they were right next to us, that became my haven of like wisdom and knowledge. And I would listen for hours to people who were much smarter than me, who had built businesses, and listen to their challenges and how they overcame, and one by one. And then that stuff sinks in, right? And now you're standing in a position where you have to make a decision and you rely on that. Like it's helpful to have that kind of like, oh, I heard that conversation and that's what he did. It's even better than books for me because it was really experiential to hear people's storytelling about their journeys. And yeah, and so one little decision at a time, you end up becoming very strategic. you know I have to say that like my business acumen today is like 100 times than it was when I first started, because I really didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. It kind of found me. I didn't really find it. Um, and it was because of a love for what I do more than any kind of financial payout. And that's also something that I think matters a lot when you're pursuing entrepreneurship or a business, is the desire to put your service to the world. I think I want to say has to, and maybe it's a little risky to say that, but I think it has to be stronger than your desire to make money.
I'm inclined to agree with you. And that is something that I only learned, I'd say, in the last 10 years. And I mean, because when I was acting, or real estate or any of the things that I was doing before, my primary source was, is this going to bring in money?
Mm.
Right. And there was, I think the ancillary source was, do I like it? Or am I good at it? Or can I be good at it? But the the primary source was never, I am passionate about this, or I want to do this, or this is super important to me. I'm now going to figure out a way to do it. It wasn't
Mm.
until that became the thing when I started to see success, whatever you want to call success. And I think you're right. I know in our world we really don't use have to or should often. Yet I think I'm going to hang my hat on this one. It has to be process over results. It has to be, right? And you have to enjoy the process, because the process, for the most part, will dictate the results. We talked about this for going to the gym, right? If you keep showing up, byproduct of you keep showing up at the gym, you're going to get in better shape. A byproduct of you putting $5 away every day, you're going to have savings at the end of the week. It has to be process over results. And last year was my first full year. In 2023, I started, but from January 1 to December 31st was my first full year running my own practice, right? So it's been now almost 2 years.
Congrats. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. And I have to say, a lot of it was and is, I enjoy it. I love it. I love listening to people, and I still consider myself, and I am not only a novice, but I'm learning. And being in school has been beyond helpful. I've become a better coach, and I'm probably operating at like 35-40% of what I could be doing, but I love it. And the byproduct, oh, money's coming in, and I'm being paid for the service that I'm providing. But I don't believe if I started with, I just want to do something that's going to make money, because that's how we end up in things that either we don't enjoy but they're lucrative. And I've had no desire in life to do anything that I didn't enjoy but was lucrative. Um, that doesn't mean I'm not motivated by money. I love money, and I love lobster, and I love flying first class, and I love champagne. Everyone who knows me knows I am a very bougie man. Yet I am a very bougie man. Yet Yet I also have a strong desire to serve, and to, when I put my head down at night, feel good about what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think that's super important what you're saying, because money, I think, to me is it's, I want to say it's an assumption. We need money to survive, and how much money is personal to each person. I remember one very wise man tell me, or not tell me directly, but I heard through somebody else say, um, you have enough money when money is no longer the decision maker. So, have enough money to be able to do anything, to not think about it, basically. Have enough money to not think about having money. And I actually love that, because it's what happens when you have so much passion. You have to have the passion to be able to sit in the process every day. Because the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about was, you know, I left a 40-hour job, 40 hours a week job to work 70 for like a tenth of the pay. Right? So if you don't
Yeah.
love what you're doing and you're getting paid a tenth of the pay, what are you going to do with that? But I mean, for sure, once you hit a threshold of providing for your family and, maintaining your lifestyle that you want, I think what makes people grow, the companies that, like the Elon Musks of the world and the Steve Jobs of the world, they're not driven by money. They're driven by service, by impact, by passion, by, the multiplier effect. And it's that I think is the sustainable, because if it's all about money, you'll sell, you'll get out, right? And that's okay too. That's totally fine. But I feel like when you're talking about like the grind to get out of that statistic of, the 20% who fail in the first year, um, that needs more than just a financial reward. It takes a grit that comes with a desire to make a difference for me anyway, personally. And
I'm with you. No, no, I'm with you. You said there the desire to make a difference. And as you were talking, I was thinking about someone that we both really appreciate, it's Kobe Bryant, right? And I've heard you talk about Kobe a number of times, so I know the same level of reverence for him exists for you as it does for me. And there are so many Kobe quotes, but there's one that comes to mind, and he says, "I want to be the best." He said, "I want to be the best." And there is a level of fanaticism that comes with that. And
yes,
so if you start with that, like obviously there's a love of basketball for him, there was. Now, there are a lot of people who like playing basketball, who maybe even love playing basketball. But the desire to be the best is what separates. And you talked about, this number of businesses that fail the first year and what it takes to get past that. Sometimes it's a lot of luck, it's making the right decisions, a bunch of things. And for me, I'll tell you, Natalie, my number one goal is, it's a scary one. I'm like, I want my second year to be better than my first. I want to be better than before. And that puts a lot of pressure on yourself, but it's that Kobe mentality of I want to be the best. And if and then that's process driven. Okay, so what is that going to take? In order to be the best for Kobe, it meant being in the gym before everyone else. It meant leaving right after everyone else. It meant doing all these things that were considered just nuts, but that's what it takes to be the best. And that's so process driven. You said, you left a 40-hour-a-week job to get a tenth of the pay, right? And now you're working 70 hours. Okay, well, that's all process. You're working every single day. And you know yourself, you do know when you're putting work in. Like I know that last year this time I was probably grinding more than I'm grinding right now. Right. And so I know that if I want to exceed what I did last year, I need to turn it up even more. Right. But that's all process driven. That's all process driven. So what is the motivator?
yeah, and I mean those were the first years of the business. Like, I mean, when I think about how much, because in the first years of a business, you're putting more money back into the business than you're taking out, right? So it's this idea of building and multiplying and knowing that that grind will pay off, right? So we're going into our 10th year next year.
Yeah.
And when I look at the growth curve, it's exponential. Like it's really cool to look back. But I remember in the first 3 years, I would have a vision board and I would have this number that I needed to hit every year. And I would go to bed visualizing that number and I would wake up with it in my face and I would have it everywhere because I needed it to stay present. And I wouldn't dream about, oh, what it will feel like when I had that. What I would dream about was the process I needed to engage in to get there, the mindset I needed to get there, the drive and the consistency I needed to get there.
Mhm.
When Kobe Bryant talks, he talks about, getting in the gym at 4:30 compared to 5:30, and he calculates how many extra hours of practice he would get in a month just doing that one small shift. And I remember hearing that going, if I get up just a little bit earlier, if I work just a little bit longer, I get that much more in my day and that much more use of my time and energy and focus. And really, that's what it was. I just did a little bit longer. And now that my weeks are different, they're still long, lots of hours, but the joy that I get in doing what I love, because I remember in that first year when I would work super hard to get one cohort of 6 people every 3 months, basically was the first year of our business. I would remember dreaming like, I just want to do this every day, all day long. I loved it so much, the teaching, the facilitation. And then this month we had 80 people in 1 month, never mind 6 in every 3 months. So that
Yeah.
is just this phenomenal experience. And I looked up, I saw, oh my God, it was manifested. Like that's what happened. Got to do this work as much as I wanted to, like dreamed of doing it back then, right? And that is a big part of how I think coaching and being a visionary for yourself and for others is, or helping others create their vision is such a powerful part of what we do as coaches. Yeah.
I love it. You said, you asked me at the top, what about coaching do I love and what do I do? And I said I help people get to where they're going. And you said it even better than I could, is helping people create their vision. And I use this analogy. Anyone who knows me knows this. You're about to learn this about me. I'm a massive Lion King fan.
See,
And
you
like,
mentioned that in class. I
yes,
think
okay,
that's
yes, yes. And I think everything you need to know about life is in the Lion King. And when I started my practice, I had the Lion King in mind, and I thought many of us are who are looking to achieve or looking to, whether it's Kobe or be the best or looking to have something, you know, it takes climbing that pride rock, and
Mm,
it takes, you know, encountering fear and
mm,
overcoming obstacles. And many of us, you said those early years of of you coaching, of you starting the business, those were some long hours during the week. But there's a flip side. If you're not doing that, then you're hanging out with Timon and Pumbaa, Hakuna Matata, and you're not going to get work done in the Hakuna Matata world. You know what you're going to do? You're going to eat grub and you're going to be like slimy and satisfying, but that's not going to get work done. And I think a lot of people get to this place where we end up in Hakuna Matata world and we're far from where we should be, or kind of forget who we are. And it takes a lot of work, I think, to get off the couch or to get out of that Hakuna Matata and say, I am not where I should be. I am more than what I am or what I've become. And I need to kind of get my butt to Pride Rock and overcome that. But that's not an easy thing. You talk about that Kobe, Kobe mythology of being in the gym at 4:30. That's a decision. That's a choice. It's not easy. It's much easier to be in the club till 4:30 in the morning and and party. But there's a sacrifice that comes with that, and there's something that you're giving up. Uh, and so for me, when I remember that Lion King kind of like analogy, it's a great way to kind of propel you because it takes work and is a constant decision, and it's so much. You know how easy it is to eat cake. Look. I don't have a sweet tooth, right? But I'm a savory and salt guy, so it's much
yeah, me
easier
too.
for me to
I'm a
eat.
salt
Okay, there we go.
person.
You're a salt person, perfect. So you'll
Yeah.
you'll you'll get it.
I'm like
Like
cake,
you,
nah, but
yeah,
salt,
that means
give me
nothing
a
to me.
chip and
Yeah,
all.
yeah, means nothing. I don't care. Like cheesecake, that's not gonna do it for me.
Yeah.
Chips, oh, all day,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But it's so much easier to eat chips than it is to work out, or it's so much easier, I think, to say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna stick in this job that I don't necessarily like, but it's safe, than it is to say, I'm going to start an academy. And I love that you checked me. You didn't start an academy, you started a course. And I love that because it's so important for people to hear, because we often we see the academy, or we see the big end goal. We see the Oscars are going to happen this month. We see the person getting on stage. We don't see the bad auditions. We don't see the crying in the car, right? We don't. We see the results. And it is that work that is not displayed, right? It's that work that is done in the dark that is often uncelebrated, that allows us to be on that stage under the lights. But it has to be that work in the dark.
Oh yeah, I mean, and what you bring up for me is the romanticism that we sometimes attach when we see other people's stories, like Elon Musk slept under his desk for months.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Like I want to do that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What do you
No,
think
you
it's like
don't.
sleeping under your desk? I know, but like,
Yeah.
like people say, oh, that's like, oh, the 5 a.m. club sounds nice, but do you really are you somebody who wants to
Mm,
be up at 5 a.m.? Like that is the decision you're talking about, right? The gym is, I think I told you the other day, the class, I was hesitating to go to my workout and my trainer was waiting for me. And like, I think I said this in class.
Yes, yes, your daughter checked you.
Daughter, I don't want to go. And she's like, what are you going to listen to your feelings or your habits? I was like, oh, that is like, I don't need that reflected back to me. Needless
She
to
was
say,
right.
I went.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's true
But you
though.
need
We listen
that.
to our feelings too much, I think. And if
Oh
we
yeah.
get that in the, if we just, it's a decision and that's what it is. Like I get up I have a schedule and if I think too much, I may not do it because I get caught up
Mm,
feeling, right? And yes, of course I'm human. And there are times when, yes, I fail. I totally fail. And I remember like, the grind of starting the business was so much uncertainty, so much fear, so much at stake, um, conflict in my mind and in my, even in my relationships at the time, like people saying, don't do it or do it, or like all these different, and I have, so much respect for people who walk that line, who go and do, sit in that grief and in that it's grief sometimes, right? You're leaving something behind, safety, to step into a world that is full of risk. Even though we think that jobs are safe, but ultimately they're so
mhm.
not. They don't necessarily hedge against inflation. You can lose your job at any moment. You're really serving someone else. Like that's not necessarily my idea of safe, but we tend to think that having a job employed by somebody else is safe. And that's another for another podcast and another conversation. But I
Yeah.
really think that there's there is that. I look back on those times, even crying myself to sleep, not knowing what am I going to do? How am I going to get this
Mm,
to work? Right. And the fear of being a single mom, or at the time, a solo parent, very
yeah.
young kids, all those things were real. And that desire, that fear that you talk about, oh my God, that was my biggest fuel. Fear was my biggest fuel. I was so afraid. And if I had not been afraid, I don't know that I would have succeeded.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. That is, that's full circle on the fear. You use it as a motivator, you use it as an ally. And that's one of the things that I think is my first lesson I started talking about when I started coaching was use it as an ally, not an adversary. And I think about, my mom was a single mom and she raised two of us and then later three of us total. But I remember walking out of the bathroom as a kid and hearing my mom on the phone, and sorry, mom, I'll reveal this. She's fine. She knows I talk about her all the time. But hearing her in the bedroom, right, crying and asking, "What am I going to do for money? What am I going to do for the kids?" And my mom is my probably my biggest hero. And when I think about that, that was not an option for her. Quitting wasn't an option, right? And it wasn't an option she certainly was going to entertain. But that was a real question. What am I going to do for money? What am I going to do for these kids? And you then use that to then go do it. All right. Because the other alternative was just not a viable option. And it's a decision, right? So there were feelings involved, credit to your daughter. Yeah, there were feelings, right? But she chose not to be her feelings. You chose not to be your feelings. That doesn't mean they go away. They don't. They're there.
Oh,
Uh,
they go away, but they do they do lessen their hold on you. Like I,
yes.
like the work, the doing
Mm,
is certainly a part of the breaking down that emotional hold that feelings have on you for sure.
I couldn't agree more. And I think about, there's such a difference geographically between the East and the West of the world. And it's one thing that I hear from friends of mine who are from the East, and they'll refer to everyone like it's from the West. And the Europeans as well, is everyone over here in North America or everyone in the UK, who they consider to be in the West, we're so feelings based. and
Mm,
we are so, how does this make me feel? What, am I okay with this? And it's not that those in the eastern part of the world don't have feelings. They do, certainly do, right? And I've been to Japan a number of times. I've been to a number of places in Europe a number of times. These feelings exist, but one of the differences, and some mass generalization, and one of the differences I've noticed is exactly what you said. Those feelings exist, but they are not allowed to take hold of those individuals or that individual as much as here. And I think we sit with our feelings a lot. And that's not a good nor bad, it's just a choice. But the folks who I either coach or I've encountered have the feelings, they acknowledge them, and yet they go do the work. They do not allow those feelings to prevent them from doing the work or doing what needs to happen to move forward.
right. And that's why feelings, like exploration of feelings and coaching is so important, because a lot of people do let those feelings get in the way of progress. And
Yes.
and so I totally agree with you though, like that once you get over um that feeling, that like letting the feeling take control, this is, I mean, I don't know. I remember Mel Robbins again. It's funny. I just discovered her. I didn't really even know who she was. And then I started listening to her podcast last week. I was like, oh, this is cool.
No, Mel's great. Yeah.
Yeah, but she talks about feelings. Like, forget those. Like, what are you talking about? Don't let that be the thing that governs your life, because you're gonna be stuck, you know? So it's such a good conversation. And I just realized the time, like that went by so fast. I don't know what's over. But I respect
That's a
the time.
good sign.
Yeah.
What I call that? I call that the well, I guess these don't really exist anymore, but the DVD or the VHS check is if you
Oh
are
my
having a
God. Now
great,
you're dating yourself here.
I know VHS, yeah, I'm saying to myself for
Don't
sure.
pull in the beta track. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know beta, so I can actually do beta too.
Oh no.
But what I call I'll go DVD, so no one thinks I'm that old. But the DVD check is if you are, you're watching a great show or a great movie, and particular show, and you look at the DVD and you see the clock and you're like, oh my gosh, there's only 10 minutes left, like what's going to happen? That's a sign that you're enjoying the show. But if you're watching a show and you're like, still got 20 minutes of this, that's a bad sign. So the conversation should be like the DVD check. you
Yeah.
you want to get to the point where you're like, wow, we're already done.
Yeah, no, it's good. We need to make this podcast longer, but I actually have a class to teach in 15 minutes.
That's important.
I know that is important, but thank you so much for your time, Laurence. It was so great to get into this with you. And I see like there's like a part two and a part three, I'm sure, down the road.
I love it. Let's do the trilogy. I love this. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Well, just before we go, where can people reach you if they want to know more, or reach out?
Absolutely. So the company I founded is called Go Further Coaching. So you can find us at gofurthercoaching.com.
Mhm.
I'm Laurence Anthony. I'm LinkedIn, Instagram, all the places. Not TikToks. I think TikTok might be done, is in the process of
Right.
being done. But
Thanks.
all the places, Lawrence with a U, totally French Canadian. Lawrence Anthony,
But
Go
you're in
Further
New York.
Coaching.
We didn't even talk about that. You're in New York,
I
right? New York
I
City?
am. I am.
Yeah.
That's so yeah, that's part two and three maybe. But yeah, so
That's
you can
great.
find me
Yeah.
online everywhere.
But you're cross border, right? People can
I'm
go to
cross
New
border.
York.
I'm supposed to be in Toronto today, so we'll see if that happens with this flight detail. So we'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will put your contact information in the show notes.
Wonderful.
And yeah, really great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Natalie. Looking forward. See you soon.